You're listening to All About Face with Ruth Faven.
Conversations rooted in love, discoveries, and the unique gifts we each have to share to make this world a better place. So today, I'm here with Marcia, my neighbor. And the way we came to know each other, well, let me have you tell them.
Well, I think we being neighbors, you do the proverbial wave, and then over time you see people more and more, and then you say hello, and then you find other than living in the same community, you have other commonalities. And so over time we realized, I think, that we were both caregivers.
We are both caregivers. And when Marcia and I really started talking, it was kind of a disaster in my life, actually, for 100 different reasons. And Marcia looked like the face of normality at the time.
But unbeknownst to you, you realized that I was also a caregiver, and you feel like your life is not your own sometimes. So
that may be the one biggest piece of it, right?
Yeah. So on the facade, you look fine on the outside, and the inside, I think sometimes as a caregiver, you realize, yeah, I'm just waiting for things to crash down around me.
Waiting for the, in my life, it had been 4 consecutive life-threatening falls during those particular years, following 16 years ago a AAA aneurysm.
Right.
Where 98% of the people die and 2% of the people live. And because we were very fortunate, in fact, there's no question Norman is meant to still be in this world, because not only do we live really close to Abington Hospital, which saved his life, but that day when it happened, when I called, he said it was my first day of summer vacation, and I go off to yoga with my friend, and I'm now going to do my second happiest thing, which is go to the garden store. And I say, Linda, I really should go home. Norman was done teaching a couple weeks before me. He's waiting for me. Let me just go home. First day of summer. But in case, you think that this is just a sad tale, there are some remarkable pieces to that tale, because one of the last days of him being there, obviously you have to get him off of feeding tubes. Mm-hmm. And in order to get somebody off of feeding tubes, they have to be able to swallow. Mm-hmm. And I was a person, I knew enough, because both of my parents had passed in hospitals due to mistakes. So, you learn lessons the hard way. So I knew that I needed to totally move in with him, so that even though I had Alex, who was only 16 years old at the time, I knew I needed to be there 24 hours a day, because he couldn't advocate for himself. So I'm a firm believer, and this is for everybody who's out there, you have to have an advocate if you're in the hospital.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely, right? I'm sure you have the same experience.
I have not only that they have to have an advocate. I think sometimes it depends on a lot of factors. One, doctors are looked upon as like
infallible,
exactly, and that's not always the case. So,
well, who is?
Right. And
it's an unrealistic expectation that 24 hours a day, this person.
Right. And they're human. They are human. And so you need an advocate, because the person who is ill, they're not always in the right state of mind to speak up for themselves and to say, hey, I want this to happen, or I don't want this to happen. I want to have this quality of life, etc. So you do definitely need an advocate as a person to not only speak for how the person who's ill wants to live, and then also as checks and balances for the type of care that you wish for that person to have in the hospital.
Yeah, and it takes me back. The surgeon who performed the operation, because Norman was in for 5 hours first. And then, I'm just waiting for him to come out and waiting to find out what's, is he alive? Is he dead? What's the story going to be? And then that was then it starts to get really long, and I'm waiting a couple of hours, and I'm thinking something is going on here. And it turned out that they had to rush him back in because he had lost circulation in his one foot. They had been able to identify that. And so then they performed a fasciotomy, which is simply like because he had been all stapled up the front of him with this, aortic aneurysm, that they didn't want to staple him anymore. So they just sliced the leg down either side.
Oh, wow.
And they let the stuff drain out. So he has tremendous, if you look at him now, he's like, think of the Velveteen Rabbit,
right?
Just beating up one side and down the other, right? But the surgeon had come out afterwards, after the whole thing was over. And he said, well, he's alive. And this was what he said. And now we have to keep him that way.
Oh.
And I thought, I heard you. Thank you. That's all I needed. Got it. I've got that message. So I knew I needed to be there. But in being there, you learn a lot. But, for the people listening out there, you just want to know that there are other modalities. Like for Norman, touch is huge and had always been. So he knew me by my touch when he didn't recognize who I was.
Right.
But also, back to the swallowing, the night before that test was run, we had his daughter Laura and one of his best friend Richie Rudin, who plays the piano wonderfully. They came in each with their iPods and with a ear pod in each ear with Norman. Right, because he doesn't know either one of them.
Right.
But now Norman has a huge eclectic love of music forever, since youth. And we had loved this, what's her name? Patty, I can't think of the actress's name, the singer. But anyway, she sings it's very funny. Spanish, I'm suddenly Spanish. And so when he hears that line, he's singing it out. So this person who's completely not present, not talking to anybody, is suddenly singing part of Candide. When there's classical music, tears are running down his face. And he sang enough that night and whistled enough that the next day he had strengthened his vocal cords. So, and then they allowed me to watch that procedure because they got used to me. And so just one last thing about that. They sat him up in the tallest, most formal chair, and they had a piece of Velcro that was 3 feet wide, and they wrapped him in Velcro because he had no muscle strength. So he's literally wrapped into the chair. And I'm watching his gullet on a screen as he swallows. And it was in Seinfeld, the Yankee Bean episode, do you know? Norman, being a mathematician who needs everything in place, the minute he got into the house, it was crazy. But the minute we got into the house, he started to reconstruct everything that we had moved in order to make life easy for him. He's now going to put it all back in place. And that brought a whole lot. He went on working for another 10 years, and he would drive today if you weren't going to chase him out of the car.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So they didn't. And the neurologist was young. So the brain reconstructs certain things.
Yes, it does. It rewires itself. And, call me spiritual, but I think too, you can't discount the power of prayer. Right. Because many times, if you look at, James has had the CAT scans of his brain, and he's even been a subject for different studies.
Oh, that's
You know,
interesting.
he volunteers. He has a science background, so you know he was always conducting the experiments. But then later he became the experiment. But they look at his brain and are like, "Wow, why are you here?" You know, and how are you here? You know, if you
'Cause
see
there's
all
so
the
much-
damage, and you know, sometimes I, you know, used to tell him, you know, you're still here, because he would ask himself, why am I still here? I'm a broken person in essence. I can't walk like
Did
I
he
used
feel
to.
that way?
He did.
He
And
did.
you know, I can't use the right side. I can't use my arm. My right arm, and I'm right-handed. I have a brace on my leg. You know, why am I here? And I had to say, you know, God had a plan for you for some reason. I may not know what it is, but I know that there was a lot of people praying for you, and God answered some prayers that day, because as you can see, and as many of the doctors will say, you're not supposed to be here, you know?
Right. And I think Norman falls into that same category.
Right.
And I thought this could be my son.
Right
here, right now. You know, this man has got to come through this experience.
Right.
And, you know, and that was the power of prayer.
Yeah, definitely.
And even Norman, who's Jewish, said Jesus at one point, even though he would scoff about that to this day. He would. But because I know I want to get to you just with caretaking. And certainly one of the funniest things I always love that you would say is James is special.
Oh, yes. I mean,
so why is James special?
I think because just because you have an illness and you have someone taking care of you, it doesn't change the person completely. They're still, deep down, they're the same person.
They sure are.
That they always were. And so I always say that James is special because, you know, example is, I think I share with you the hot dog, you know. There have been aides that have come in to assist, and, you know, you normally you could say, oh yeah, he would eat a hot dog during the day, blah, 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 for lunch, blah, blah, blah. And you think to yourself, a hot dog, no big deal, right? You know, bun, hot dog, mustard or ketchup.
Right.
And you're done. Oh no.
What?
So James likes his, and he'll tell you exactly what he likes. This is over the top. So, you know, I'm a person, I like my hot dogs fried. I don't know. Do you like your hot dogs fried or boiled? Well, no, James likes his boiled with the bun steamed and sauerkraut with chopped up onions. But you have to heat the onion with the sauerkraut, and not just plain old yellow mustard. It has to be brown mustard. And then occasionally he'll want, like, he needs pickles on the side. So, you know, again, for someone who's like, okay, I have like 20 minutes to cook, you know, breakfast or lunch. The challenge, I think, of being a caregiver, because it's having you understand that, okay, this is a different person and they're used to having things done, you know, their way. But then now you're doing the things that this person can't do, plus the things that you still have to do for your own life, you know?
Right. So how do you take care of you?
And well, that's important, because you have to have that balance. I think one way is having someone to springboard that frustration. You know, that's a key thing. Even if it's just someone who just listens to you rant because you've decided to rant that day, because it's over the top. You have to
be able to.
You have to have a person that's willing to listen to you. And then you also have an outlet for yourself, I think is real important. Whether it's just time to do you. And it could be going to get your nails done, or walking through the park, or going to see a movie. Having just some time to yourself that you don't have to worry about anybody else. You just worry about what you need to re-energize and do for you. So I think those are two key things. And then also, after a certain amount of time as a caregiver, you need time to and assistance in finding people who will take over those responsibilities so that you can just, again, maybe do you, but maybe for a longer period of time, maybe going away.
Yeah.
So I think those are, I mean, it's one thing to have that couple of hours to yourself at home, but if you're living with the person, you need some time away.
You know, whether the chicken, you know, or the egg came first, is my thyroid had gone off, which I never even knew to look into my thyroid, but that only to find out, you know, my mother had thyroid issues. So that probably contributed to the depression. And then when I say, and also my B12 of recent times was extraordinarily low. Well, when you Google that a little bit, turns out you can't think clearly. Well, so I wasn't able to think clearly enough. I was named after my Ruth. I saw that whole, I was raised where there were older people around, you know, unlike a lot of people today. So I saw my grandmother through all her latter years. And then my dad was much older than my mother. So I saw all of that. So I knew what it was to caretake. Right. And they were great at it, but to a fault.
Right.
To a fault. My mother passed long before my father, even though she was 18 years younger. And I had promised myself I wouldn't do that, but here I was doing that because I couldn't think clearly enough to be like, how do I get help?
Right.
What do you mean get help? And then through a friend, finally got this angel person who's just the right fit because, again, and other people might find the same thing, I couldn't, my husband had a round of therapy and people who came in, you know, and one person was a young person, so there she is on her cell phone. Well, I wouldn't do that to my husband.
Right.
There's no way I would insult him. Like, he's looking at me like, are you kidding me? And I'm looking at her like, are you kidding me? Like, you're being paid and you're not conversing at all with my husband, like in any way, shape, or form. So in his particular case, I needed to bring somebody in who was going to talk to him. Like, so they have rich conversations when she comes in. Right. She asks him questions. He winds up he's always liked women. He asks her questions and they're forming a deep bond.
Right.
And so, you know, it couldn't be any more than I would stick a child with just anybody. I wasn't going to be just anybody coming into my house, you know, not from a sense of safety, but just from a sense of, you know, there's a real person in there that I want to make sure that he's comfortable with. And of course, you know, his first response before he met her even, because he's oppositionally inclined by nature for a lifetime. The first conversation was, oh no. Well, of course, he, you know, just like a child, he would prefer me 24/7.
Right.
But that's where, from a caregiving standpoint, I was fierce in a surprising way for me, because I'll go from being, you know, la, 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 taking care of you, to, okay, then I'm leaving, and I'm leaving for a month. Bye-bye.
Well, I mean,
packed my bag and left with that intention, because I thought, are you kidding me? I have been with you for, now it's like 60 years.
Right.
And, well, no, 50. I have been with this man for 50 years, taking great care of him, and solely taking care of him for 16 years. Entitled to a little relief.
Right. And I think that's important for a caregiver to, and I had to overcome this as well, some of the guilt. Like I think it's similar. I think it's similar.
Guilt-inducing.
Right.
Sadly.
Just like a new mom has to leave their kid with
you don't want
a
to
new
hear
daycare center, and you don't want to hear any cry. That's guilt inducing. And I think the same thing can happen with the caregiver, the primary caregiver, because you then know need to get away, and you want to get away,
but you can't get away.
But you can't, or something in the back of your mind is saying, this person can't do it the way I do it. You know what I mean? Or they may not.
That is its own trap as well. Right. That's a big one.
And also,
that's a big one.
They can't do it as well. Plus, they don't know the person as well. But then I had to learn over time, just let it be.
You have to surrender.
And-
if you really are
right.
going to have any kind of a life, you
right.
must.
And
you
they're
have
not
to take
gonna-
care of yourself.
And they're not going to clean like you, maybe the same way.
Right.
You can give instructions and write the list and everything.
Well, and you're perfect at that, and you know that didn't work so well.
And it doesn't always work. But you have to, throw your hands up and say, it's going to be okay. This
Yes.
is not the end of the world.
Right.
Yes.
And help groom them to some absence, just like a child, because the child is fine and they will be fine if you leave them in good hands.
Correct.
And you'll go back. I found myself, I went back so much more loving. Mm-hmm. Really, because I just I was just completely and 100% over it.
Right.
I thought, I'm not getting thanked. He's never been a great thanker. He does. On a good day, I totally know he appreciates it.
And then sometimes
So then when you're beaten down just
Right.
because you've stayed too long at the fair,
right.
you're like, okay, now I gotta go.
Right. And again, you also have to laugh at those times when they do say thank you and you're ready to fall out of the chair because
it's wonderful.
It's like, what happened to
It's
did
wonderful.
the alien come down and take them? Because
Right.
they actually said thank you.
Right. And I think, and this, God bless her soul, the woman, Susan, who comes in and relieves me for a couple of hours a week. So I have a feeling she has helped him understand, because she was also a caretaker of a person who had a brain aneurysm, that I think she helped him to understand that saying the occasional thank you. This
Right.
man who's virtually never in his life said thank you. And I'm like, gosh, it's nice to have a thank you.
Right.
Thank you for saying thank you.
And I think they appreciate, because they do see, again, that you may not do it, that the substitute or the respite care isn't doing the same things that you do, and they
see the difference.
They see the difference.
They do see the
which
difference.
is really quite important. And I think too, a lot of times,
And I don't know about you, but Norman makes me laugh.
oh yeah, James can make me laugh too sometimes, or especially the times that they defiance, like a kid has defiance, and just like if a kid, you're like, okay, go ahead and do it. You think you can do it? Go ahead and do it. Prove me wrong. And then they realize, oh, she was right. Oh, darn. I'll tell you one funny story. James wanted to go to the supermarket.
Okay.
And if anybody knows me, they know I can't stand going to the supermarket. I'm not one of those people who'll go, oh, yeah, I have to go to this market for broccoli and this one for the chicken that's on sale. It's like, one and done, I'm out. I really don't want to go here anymore. And I say, I really don't feel like it. It's nothing that we really need. It's nothing that can't wait until, tomorrow or the next day. I want to go to the market. I'm going to walk. Now, we do live pretty close to a market, correct?
Yeah, but it's an awful walk under that bridge.
And it's a very steep hill.
Steep hill.
It might as well be
if you're going to fall, you're going to fall right into traffic.
right. And you might as well be in Switzerland. It's so steep, right? So he is.
It's a nasty walk.
He goes walking out of the house with the cane and walking like Mr. Magoo. And I was like, okay. I figured, well, he has ID on him. And if he falls out in the middle of the street, bring him up the hill. And he'll realize that, this wasn't the easiest thing to do. So, I got a little late. And it was dark by now.
Oh, wow. Now it's really not good coming
Right?
up that hill.
So, and mind you, he's going to the market. So that means carrying a bag full of stuff too, right?
Great for balance.
Right, great for balance. And so later that night, he comes in and I see him come in. He has leaves all in his hair, all in his, but he made it back. And I said, you fell, huh? He's like, yeah, someone stopped their car and helped me up. But I mean, and I just said, okay. And then just kept it moving. Never once again did
he choose to do that.
he choose to do it again.
Good to know that you're helping, even if it's just one other person in the world.
Exactly.
You're making somebody's world a much brighter place. You know, so thanks so much for coming in and talking
It was a pleasure.
about caregiving and being a caregiver. And I'm so grateful to you. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
No problem.
This has been All About Face with Ruth Faven.